Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for Wow Me Wednesday. As you can see, I have a guest with me today. This is Melanie Ho, and she is a speaker, an author, and a workshop host to help people with diversity, equity, and inclusion. She wrote this book, Beyond Leaning In, which I recommend you guys all check out to give us all more awareness about how we communicate in the workplace as one aspect of it, which is related to what we're going to talk about today. So thanks for joining us, Melanie.
Oh, thank you, Jessica. I'm so excited to be here.
And just to give you a backstory, Melanie and I were good friends in high school. So we go way back. And she was like president of our class and like top of the class. And so, and a beautiful artist. So, I mean, she's always been super talented and still continues to wow me today. So it was a no-brainer to invite her on to share with you all about this topic. I know I often share with all of you, my audience, about ways to come across more confident, feel more confident, and also be perceived more confident when you're speaking to a group in a meeting, at work, on camera. And Melanie is going to give us some more details on how this can affect our reputation in the workplace or in business, right, Melanie?
Yeah, absolutely. I've done a lot of thinking and work about just how women and men are perceived differently in business, and particularly the tightrope that women have to walk on, where there are stereotypically masculine traits at work and there are stereotypically feminine traits at work. And while all of us have a combination of them, men are allowed a much wider spectrum of acceptable traits, whereas for many women, they describe it as kind of like a Goldilocks dilemma. They're trying to figure out, I can't be too assertive or too aggressive, but I also can't be seen as too meek and too quiet. And how do I walk that exact little narrow line in between?
Right. I know for me, I've been trained to sound more confident in certain ways through my phrasing and also my delivery and what I say. And your comics, so Melanie has these comics because she's a great artist. She shares these comics on Instagram and in her book that illustrate scenarios that we're often put in business and in the workplace. So I'll share some of those with you and Melanie can talk through them right now.
I like on Instagram, you can kind of look and see which posts people share with a friend in some of the back data. And this is the post that I think gets shared the most out of all my comics. And a lot of women say that they really identify with this because there's so much discussion of how women need to lean in. And we don't also talk about, okay, well, how are women and men socialized differently? So here, what I wanted to show is that women are constantly told to do things like talk louder and interrupt and take up space. I remember in grad school and at work being told, okay, you got to figure out how to get in there, like bulldoze if you need to. I worked with a lot of men who like to interrupt each other and would raise their voices. And I remember being taught that and having to practice. I would practice it almost was like a game to me. We'd be in a meeting and I'd kind of watch these men almost like a ping pong match trying to shout for one another and trying to get in there. And I would realize that I would sort of start with my voice at a certain volume. And then with every sentence or phrase, I would just keep raising it a little bit, one phrase at a time so that it wouldn't seem too aggressive right away because women can't shout at the beginning like men can. It was almost like starting gentle and then getting louder and louder and louder until they would pause. And that's how men are often just practice. That's what they do. There's an episode of my podcast where I have two male millennials come on and talk a little bit about being told to do that in school, being told to assert themselves. Now, what I wonder is, why aren't men told to do what women are socialized to do, which is listen and amplify others and gain influence by understanding what the other person's point of view is so you can tailor your message. And that all of these skills are really important to have. And yet women are often taught one thing and men are often taught another thing, rather than all of us trying to understand the benefits of both perspectives.
Yeah, I love that.
So Jessica, as you know, I'm not a sports person at all. And Probably the last person who should be using any sports metaphors.
But hey, it's what people understand. A lot of people understand.
Exactly, but it works.
Mhm.
And basketball is probably the one sport that I can kind of wrap my mind around what's going on. And this is just one I love from basketball. I remember when I was a kid, my dad was a big Lakers fan. And we would watch games and I barely understood what was going on, but he would explain to me, oh, there are points and there are assists. And people really care about the points. That's what everyone always talks about as far as which players are the best. And that's wrong because assists matter too.
Yeah.
The team can't score as a whole without assists. And so as I started to watch meeting dynamics and workplace culture and talk to other women about what they were experiencing at all kinds of industries, all kinds of organizations, I realized that this points versus assists metaphor really applies to meeting dynamics at organizations. That many men in particular, but all of us can be socialized to points. And that might be saying something like, my opinion is this, or my favorite is when people have a statement and they word it as a pretend question, right? They're getting their opinion in there, but it sounds like a question. And that's all about advancing one's own individual viewpoint and contributions. Mm-hmm. And then there's assists. And an assist doesn't necessarily mean agreeing with everybody else, but it might be saying something like, I know you disagree, but I want to hear your view because I think that will advance the organization's collective aims as a whole and amplifying the voices of others. And both are really important, but women are often socialized to do the assist and men are often socialized to do the point. So I actually talk to a lot of male allies who, after reading my book and thinking about this comic, realize they need to pay more attention to the assists as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. And the Goldilocks Dilemma.
Yeah, so I started talking about this and the tightrope a little bit, but here I just, again, wanted to have a little bit of fun with it. And I love drawing animals. They're probably my favorite thing to draw. So I was almost just looking for an excuse to draw an animal.
I don't draw a bear.
Right, so here's a bear. And on the right, this is the same woman. And her hair's back. She's wearing the turtleneck. There's probably a tone that goes with that. Hey, she comes off a little strong. She needs to soften, let her hair frame her face. And below that, we have the woman who is seen as too stereotypically feminine. She seems too meek. She needs to learn to power pose and not wear pastels. I actually often think of this as generational advice that gets passed down. And it's not just about appearance, but how women are perceived and judged in their actions and tone and more. And so this is really hard because women shouldn't have to be judged on such a tight tightrope, shouldn't have to be constantly fighting their place in the Goldilocks dilemma. Men don't have to think about it in the same way, but what I often say to women is it's actually just important to realize that we are judged by these standards, because if we don't realize it, we can't figure out how to address it. And what happens is a lot of women, without realizing it, they kind of wonder if it's in their head and start to question themselves because, oh, is this in my head or am I being judged this way? And no, it's not in your head. This is unfortunately one of the challenges in our culture.
Right. I worked with a client who was from another country. So there was that cultural shift for her as well. But just she wanted to be sure she had authority. She sounded like she had authority, but at the same time, not step on toes. So that's exactly what you're talking about, walking that tightrope. And I feel like I face that a lot when it comes to people that I talk with and work with is we want to accomplish and have authority and be influential, yet we need to be careful without stepping on other people's toes. And so how would you recommend someone, even if it's a business owner, I have a lot of business owner clients or leaders in their organizations, in their companies, to be able to, what can they do in their next meeting, their next encounter, to think differently and assert themselves differently?
There's a great book I love. It's called Own the Room by Amy Sue and Muriel Wilkins. I hope I didn't get that wrong. But what they talk about is how we all have to have a voice for self and a voice for others. And I think that's similar to this points versus assist concept, right? all of us need to have both, and that credibility and advancing yourself in the workplace actually requires both, because if you're too much a voice for yourself and not a voice for others at all, you'll not only come across like a jerk, but if you don't understand others' needs, you're not probably going to be a very good business person. And of course, if you're just a voice for others, you may get stepped on, or people won't realize the light that you can bring to any encounter. And I love that, because I often think that about that in encounters. Okay, if I'm in a meeting or I'm about to go into, it could be a presentation, it could be a sales meeting, any kind of encounter with another human being or a group of people. Okay, where's my voice for self? Where do I have something unique to contribute? And I want to make sure that's heard. It's not necessarily about wanting to be the loudest person in the room or to show off. It's that I truly believe that there are things that I would like to say and would like to make sure that they understand. But also, where am I going to be the voice for others? And others could be, I used to manage a large team, so it could be other members of my team, or it could be others in my network that I think would be useful for the person I'm talking to meet. And it could also be a voice for them, being able to articulate their needs in a way that maybe they weren't able to clearly describe themselves. And that way we get to that perfect intersection, right? Where my voice for self and my voice for them can come together.
Yes, I love that. And I feel like even for our next meeting, you could jot that down in your notes.
Yep.
Voice for myself, voice for others. So as a reminder until
Yep.
it's ingrained in your head and you can do it without thinking. Yeah. And when it comes to nuances too, Melanie, in communication, I often coach about how to reduce filler words, the ums and the likes and the you knows and basically and all that, as well as a lot of times women use upspeak, where you end your sentences with your voice going up. And I feel like I didn't even think about it that deeply, but these are different ways that can diminish our authority too, and especially as women.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the one that so many women do is I'm sorry, right? I
Yes.
have had so many colleagues that I wanted to get them a sorry jar, and we got to put a nickel in every time you say sorry. And we probably could have gone out to really nice dinners at the end of that because it's just so ingrained. We say sorry for everything, even if there's nothing to be sorry about, and we'll say we're sorry.
Yes, that's a really, really good one. And I catch myself too. I try to
Right. Yes.
refrain from using I'm sorry if it really is not a big deal. So Melanie, where can we follow you and
You
get
can,
your book?
yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Melanie Ho 13, where you can find all of my comics, and www.melanieho.com is my website. You can find my comics there, my book there, and information about my workshops that use comics.
Thank you so much, Melanie. This was so insightful. It's so different, and I really appreciate your time and your talents.
Oh, thank you so much. I wonder what our 14-year-old selves would think about us having this conversation now.
No kidding. All right. Thanks, Melanie.
Thanks.